Deep beneath Tokyo, the air feels heavy and stale, thick with humidity and the low electric hum of fluorescent lamps. It's 8:30 in the morning, August the 6th, 1945, and the war that once promised glory has grounded Japan into exhaustion. The bunker beneath the Imperial General Headquarters buzzes with the quiet intensity of men who have stopped hoping for victory but refuse to say it out loud. Maps cover the walls, every red pin marking a lost island, every mark another retreat. General Korechika Anami, Japan's war minister, moves through the hallways with the rigid confidence of a career soldier. At 58, his face carries the calm of a man who has never admitted defeat, not to an enemy, not to fate. He believes that Japan, blessed by divine purpose, cannot fall. This morning's briefing should be routine. Overnight updates from regional commanders, progress reports on the massive home defense preparations meant to turn any American invasion into a bloodbath so costly it would force negotiations. But as he approaches the communications board, the rhythm of the room feels off. A young officer adjusts a radio dial again and again, his uniform dark with sweat. "Sir," he finally stammers, "there's no signal from Hiroshima. Nothing on any channel, military or civilian. It stops suddenly at 8:15. The room falls silent. Anami frowns, thinking the equipment must be faulty. Even under heavy bombing, cities always manage some sort of transmission. Distress calls, damaged lines, fragments of static that prove life still exists. But Hiroshima isn't sending anything. Not one word from the 2nd General Army, not one report from the 400,000 people living there. In 4 years of total war, nothing like this has happened. Cities burn, but they do not simply disappear. The thought that an entire metropolis could go silent in an instant doesn't even fit with Anami's conception of war. At this moment, Japan's fate rests with 6 men, the Supreme War Council, the so-called Big Six. They are not fools nor lunatics, though their faith in Japan's resistance borders on disillusion. There's General Anami himself, Admiral Somyu Toyoda, head of the Navy, General Yoshijiro Amazu, the Army's Chief of Staff, Prime Minister Kantaro Suzuki, Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo, and Navy Minister Mitsumasa Yonai. These are men shaped by a culture that prizes endurance above all else. Even with cities burning nightly under American firebombs, they still believe Japan can outlast its enemy. And in their minds, they have good reason to think so. For 5 years, they've known something that few outsiders suspect. Japan has its own atomic bomb project. 2, in fact. The Army's NIGO project, led by Yoshio Nishina, and the Navy's FGO program under Dr. Bunsaku Arakatsu. These are not dreamers tinkering in a lab. They are among the most capable physicists in the world. Nishina studied under Niels Bohr in Copenhagen, helped pioneer the theory of atomic fission, and understands better than most just how impossibly difficult it is to turn a theory into a weapon. And that understanding, ironically, is what blinds them. Nishina has told the military leadership the hard truth. Producing a bomb of atomic power requires vast resources, industrial plants on a scale that Japan doesn't possess, mountains of uranium ore, and enough electrical power to light entire cities for months. He's calculated that even the United States, with all its untouched factories and endless supply chains, could only produce 1 or 2 such weapons, maybe 3 if they started early. That calculation, based on sound physics, gives Japan's leaders false confidence. If the Americans have a bomb powerful enough to destroy a city, they surely can't have many. So, when word finally arrives that Hiroshima has been attacked by a single new type of bomb, no one in Tokyo panics. Admiral Toyoda barely looks up from his maps. Considerable damage from a few planes, he mutters. We've lost 40 cities already. Probably another concentrated incendiary attack. But as the morning turns to afternoon, the details grow strange. Rail lines to Hiroshima report massive obstructions. No trains are being allowed in or out. Air Recon mentions a column of smoke that rises so high it pierces the clouds, 40,000 feet or more. Then, by late evening, Tokyo intercepts a foreign broadcast from Washington. President Truman's voice carries through the static. 16 hours ago, an American aircraft dropped one bomb on Hiroshima. That bomb had more power than 20,000 tons of TNT. It is an atomic bomb. The words echo in the War Council's chamber. The officers exchange uneasy glances, but Anami's tone remains steady. This is psychological warfare, he says. Even the Americans have built an atomic device. Mass production is impossible. Our own scientists have proven it. Admiral Toyoda nods. If they truly had more than one, they would have used them before now. They believe this absolutely. Their knowledge tells them it must be true. What they can't imagine is that the United States has accomplished something beyond their entire industrial comprehension. The Manhattan Project has employed 130,000 people, spread across dozens of secret sites, consuming enough electricity to power entire nations. It is the largest hidden enterprise in human history, and that's the gap. Japan's leadership is calculating with the right equations, but the wrong assumptions. By nightfall on August the 6th, reports start to trickle in from reconnaissance planes and survivors. One pilot describes Hiroshima as gone. Not damaged, gone. Still, the Big Six meet the next morning with their composure intact, telling themselves that even if this new bomb exists, the Americans can't have many more. They cling to the thought like drowning men clutching driftwood. Meanwhile, one of the few people in Japan capable of truly understanding what happened at Hiroshima is already on his way there. Dr. Yoshio Nishina, the physicist who once told the army that an atomic bomb was nearly impossible to build, is ordered to investigate. The journey from Tokyo takes nearly half a day. Trains move slowly through a countryside stripped bare by war, until the line ends in twisted metal where the tracks have melted. Nishina continues on foot. For miles before reaching the city, he sees trees stripped of leaves, telephone poles splintered and toppled like toys. The air carries a burnt metallic starch. He walks the last 5 miles in silence. Nothing in his long career, no formula, no calculation, prepares him for what he finds. Hiroshima doesn't look bombed, it looks erased. Buildings have fallen, they've evaporated. Streets are unrecognizable. Concrete walls bear the ghostly silhouettes of people whose bodies were vaporized by heat so intense it seared their shadows into stone. At the center of the blast, the world itself seems to have been rewritten. A perfect circle of total annihilation stretches for miles, and around it the living stagger like phantoms, skin peeling in sheets, hair falling out, eyes burned nearly blind. Radiation sickness, a phenomenon Nishina has only seen described in theoretical physics journals, now walks in human form all around him. He lifts his Geiger counter. The machine chatters wildly. Even the instruments seem panicked. He realizes, standing amid the ashes, that everything he believed about the limits of science has just been obliterated. This isn't merely an explosive. It's the atom itself turned into a weapon. The energy that holds the universe together has been forced to destroy a city. When Nishina returns to Tokyo on August the 8th, his report is clinical but shaken. He confirms it beyond any doubt. Hiroshima was destroyed by an atomic bomb. His findings spread quietly among the leadership, but they don't know what to do with the information. Most can't comprehend it. Others simply refuse to. By the morning of August the 9th, as the Big Six gather to discuss their next steps, the mood in Tokyo is grim but defiant. Many still believe Hiroshima was a one-time demonstration, one bomb, an act of desperation from a cornered enemy. But before they can finish their debate, a young aide bursts through the door with a telegram that changes everything. Nagasaki has been hit, another bomb, and with that, every illusion of control evaporates. The message arrived mid-sentence, cutting through the noise of debate like a thunderclap. It was 11:02 a.m. on August the 9th, 1945. The Supreme War Council, Japan's 6 most powerful men, had been arguing for hours over what to do about Hiroshima. The Supreme War Council, Japan's 6 most powerful men, had been arguing for hours over what to do about Hiroshima when a messenger burst through the doors, his face ashen. His voice shook as he delivered the report. Nagasaki had been attacked with another atomic bomb. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Admiral Somu Toyoda's pen slipped from his hand and rolled across the table, the sound echoing in the stunned silence. The room was suddenly very small, the air heavy with the realization that Hiroshima had not been an anomaly. The Americans had another bomb, maybe more. If they had 2, they could have 10. And if they had 10, Japan might not exist by the end of the month. Every assumption they had clung to, every confident claim about Americans' supposed limits collapsed in that instant. Their entire defense plan, Operation Ketsugo, depended on convincing the enemy that invading Japan would be too costly. But why invade at all when you could erase a city in seconds? Still, some of them refused to face it. General Anami, the man whose calmness never wavered, broke the silence with a statement so haunting it left even his closest allies speechless. Would it not be wondrous, he said quietly, for the whole nation to be destroyed like a beautiful flower? He meant it sincerely. In his mind, there was something poetic, almost sacred about Japan dying in purity, rather than living in surrender. The others stared at him. uncertain whether to pity or admire him. Outside that chamber, Japan's world was collapsing. Trains had stopped running. Food shipments had dwindled to nothing. Fires from the air raids still burned across dozens of cities. And now, even the illusion of safety in distance was gone. For the first time, the generals understood that no fortress, no army, and no code of honor could defend against the sky itself. But the shock wasn't over yet. 2 days earlier, on August the 8th, the Japanese military had captured an American pilot named Marcus McDilder, shot down near Osaka. McDilder was just a 25-year-old fighter pilot, brave but completely uninformed about atomic bombs. Unfortunately for him, his interrogators didn't believe that. They wanted information about this new weapon that had destroyed Hiroshima. They wanted information about this new weapon that had destroyed Hiroshima, and they were prepared to use torture to get it. Terrified and desperate to survive, McGilder began inventing details on the spot. He told them that the United States had over 100 atomic bombs and could drop 3 per day. He said Tokyo would be next, followed by Kyoto, then Osaka. Each city would be wiped off the map in turn. To make his story sound credible, he added bits of fake science he overheard during his service. Terms like uranium, isotopes, chain reaction, none of it was true. But to Japanese officers who had seen what had happened in Hiroshima, it was believable enough to sound like prophecy. The information was rushed to Tokyo that night and placed in front of the Supreme War Council. When Anami stood to read the interrogation report, his voice trembled for the first time anyone could remember. 1 atomic bomb, he read, can destroy 6 square miles, equivalent to 2,000 B-29 bombers, each carrying 300 conventional bombs. The Americans appeared to have 100 such weapons. They could drop 3 per day. The next target may be Tokyo. The room went silent, except for the low hum of the ceiling fan. The men who had spent their lives mastering the science of war, this was something beyond war. Admiral Suzuki leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as if trying to see through it. Admiral Yanai rubbed his temples. General Yumezu lips moved soundlessly. These were not weak men. They had survived every disaster Japan had faced. But in that moment, even their faith in endurance faltered. And yet somehow they couldn't agree. 3 members, Togo, Yonai, and Suzuki, argued that surrender was the only way to save what remained of Japan. The others, Anami, Toyoda, and Amazu, refused, insisting that to yield now would mean spiritual annihilation. If Japan must die, Anami said, then let it die gloriously. The vote split evenly, 3-3. That deadlock might have lasted for days, if not for something that hadn't happened in over 1,000 years. Just before midnight on August the 9th, Emperor Hirohito summoned the Big Six to a special meeting. The setting was almost surreal, a quiet room in the imperial palace, polished wood reflecting the dim lamplight. The 6 men knelt in positions around a low table. The emperor entered, dressed simply in white robes. He was small but unassuming, his voice soft, but his presence carried divine authority. For generations, emperors had remained symbols, untouched by politics. This was the first time in modern history that a Japanese emperor had stepped into a room of generals and told them what to do. He spoke quietly without emotion. I have given serious consideration to the situation at home and abroad, he began. We must bear the unbearable and suffer what is insufferable. The words were measured, almost gentle, but they left no room for debate. Hirohito had chosen surrender. One by one, the men bowed deeply, their faces a mixture of reverence and humiliation. The God they had sworn to serve had spoken. There could be no argument, no resistance that would not be sacrilege. In the following days, Japan began preparing for the unthinkable, admitting defeat. The official acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration was drafted, though every sentence felt like a knife to those who signed it. Some officers whispered of rebellion, others wept quietly in their offices. General Anami, the symbol of unbreakable will, chose another path. On August the 15th, hours before the Emperor's surrender broadcast, he dressed in formal uniform, bowed towards the imperial palace, and performed ritual seppuku in his home. His death poem, written in his own blood, read, "I, who served my emperor to the end, die with 1,000 regrets." He never acknowledged that the new world had made his beliefs obsolete. That same day, millions of Japanese citizens crowded around radios to hear the emperor's voice for the first time. Many didn't understand his archaic phrasing, but they understood his tone. The emperor had fallen. There would be no glorious last stand, no divine wind sweeping the enemy away, only silence and surrender. After the war, as the truth of Americans' atomic program emerged, the surviving members of the War Council struggled to grasp what they had faced. When Admiral Toyoda learned that the Manhattan Project had employed 130,000 workers and consumed enough electricity to power entire nations, he was speechless. He spent hours alone staring at photographs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, saying nothing. The man who had once insisted that Americans could never build more than a handful of bombs finally understood how deeply he had underestimated. The atomic bombings didn't just end a war. They shattered a centuries-old belief that spirit could triumph over steel. Japan's leaders weren't foolish, only trapped by their own knowledge, unable to imagine that the impossible had already become real. It's a timeless warning. Every era's downfall comes not from ignorance, but from the arrogance of thinking the rules hadn't already changed. The men in that Tokyo bunker weren't defeated by lack of courage or intellect. The men in that Tokyo bunker weren't defeated by lack of courage or intellect. They were defeated by their inability to imagine a world that had already changed. And when they finally realized it, it was too late. Hiroshima and Nagasaki ended more than a war. They marked the moment progress and destruction became one. So, subscribe for more stories of how a single idea can change the world.